You're watching The Legal Breakdown. All right, so Glenn, a major bombshell Supreme Court case was handed down. This is the Chevron ruling. I know that most people aren't going to have a clue what this is, but the impacts of this case, of this decision, are going to be catastrophic. Can you walk us through what happened today?
Yeah, Brian, and let me not bury the lead. What this was a judicial power grab by the Supreme Court, which will ultimately end up potentially endangering the American people, in case we haven't been scared enough recently. So the Chevron case is 40 years old. It is settled precedent. Remember that thing called stare decisis? The thing has been decided. The Supreme Court is supposed to follow settled precedent. Well, not the conservative, radical, right-wing bloc of this Supreme Court. Here's what the Chevron case stands for. We have lots and lots of experts who work in the federal government. I guess I would consider myself an expert of sorts. I was an expert in prosecuting, in criminal litigation, and I spent 30 years as a Fed doing just that. But we have so many experts who are doctors and scientists and experts in virtually every field that is important to the sort of running of an American government. And these are people, frankly, who are public servants who could make a whole lot more money on the outside, but instead they devote themselves to public service, serving the public good. And they work for example, the EPA, right, the Environmental Protection Agency. We have doctors at the CDC who are trying to protect the health of the American people, the Food and Drug Administration. We have workplace security and safety experts working at OSHA. I mean, every manner of expert imaginable. And what the Chevron case stands for is the following proposition. When Congress passes laws giving federal agencies the power to act, the power to regulate food or water or the quality of our air or workplace safety, these experts go about promulgating, working on putting together regulations to implement that statute, that authority they've been given by Congress. Chevron said when the experts make these regulations, and there is some open question or some ambiguity regarding exactly what Congress was authorizing them to do, the courts must show deference to the experts. Makes sense, right? Because the 9 Supreme Court justices aren't experts in any of these fields. So basically, it was leave it to the experts. The judges should show the experts deference when they're going about promulgating these regulations in accordance with the laws that Congress passed, telling them they can do certain things as part of the federal government, part of the executive branch. And for 40 years, thousands and thousands and thousands of court cases applied Chevron deference when they were deciding, all manner of suits and cases that are brought against the federal government. Well, Chief Justice Roberts just said, no more deference. Judges will not show deference to any of the experts, but rather we're the only ones who can go about really interpreting statutes, laws passed by Congress, giving power to the executive branch, and we won't defer to how the experts read those statutes or try to implement them with regulations. So it really is, remember the term that we heard during the Trump administration, deconstructing the administrative state? This feels like that. It's a judiciary power grab that will sort of marginalize the power and authority of the executive branch. And I think in the long run, it will make Republican billionaires and, the American oligarchs in business very, very happy, because now it will be far easier for them to, pollute the air, to pollute the water, to put profits over the safety and security of the American people. So this all feels like part of a theme with respect to what this Supreme Court has been doing.
And obviously you just alluded to this, but the area where this would have the biggest impact is obviously in the area of climate, because prior to this ruling, to Chevron being dismantled, it was basically up to the courts to defer to the EPA, where those environmental experts would make their decisions, and then the courts would have to respect those decisions. But now you have people like Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas and people who are in the pockets of these big polluters who come before the court when they have business there. And now, because the initial reaction isn't to defer to those experts at the EPA, but rather just for the courts to decide unto themselves, that will just have a staggering impact in terms of what climate decisions are going to look like moving forward.
It will make it very easy for the judiciary to strike down whatever they, deem perhaps an impediment to business being done, to profits being maximized. Now, Brian, we can certainly sit here and say, oh, we hope that's not what's motivating the Supreme Court justices like Clarence Thomas and Alito and Gorsuch. But come on, we're living on Earth 1, where we see what this Supreme Court is about. And if you'll indulge me 1 minute, Justice Elena Kagan wrote a dissent, and she kind of summed it up brilliantly. First of all, she said, this is the rule of judicial humility, represented by the deference that should be shown to experts. This is the rule of judicial humility giving way to the rule of judicial hubris. And here is one short passage that, frankly, I think really sings in Justice Kagan's dissent. She said, quote, "In one fell swoop, the majority of the Supreme Court today gives itself exclusive power over every open issue, no matter how expertise-driven or policy-laden, involving the meaning of regulatory law. As if it didn't have enough on its plate, the majority turns itself into the country's administrative czar." Brian, I think that's not only a scathing indictment from Justice Kagan, who was joined by two other justices in that dissent, but I think she exposes what's really going on here. It is a judicial power grab, and frankly, it feels like them trying to do the old bidding of folks like Donald Trump and Steve Bannon when they said, oh, we're going to deconstruct the administrative state.
Right. I mean, if there was any doubt as to the extent to which elections have consequences, it's the fact that Trump isn't even in office, and still his lackeys on the Supreme Court continue to do his bidding on a daily basis. Glenn, what happens to all the cases where Chevron was taken into account and where, for example, deference had to be paid to the scientists at the EPA, and so it was ruled in that way? Are they going to be able to bring these cases back, or was the fact that they were already ruled on once, does that prevent them from coming up again because of double jeopardy, for example?
What a great question, Brian, because sometimes a new interpretation of the Constitution, but particularly when it involves the right of a defendant, for example, in a criminal case, has retroactive effect, and they have to go back and redo a bunch of other cases. But in this opinion, it made clear that this deference decision does not have retroactive effect, so it will not impact those thousands of cases I mentioned where Chevron deference was part of the original litigation.
Okay, but with that said, I mean, there is still the risk moving forward now for any cases that are brought forward. Even if there's some tortured effort to redo a case that had already happened, maybe by changing something here and there, we're going to see plaintiffs come forward with a whole raft of new cases in light of this new decision. I think that underscores, I know that there are folks out there who have soured on Joe Biden, but this should underscore the extent to which the Supreme Court is what's on the ballot as we head toward November. Even if you're not into what's happening with regard to Israel and Gaza, with inflation, whatever it is, if you care about what's happening at the Supreme Court and the downstream effects of what their rulings will bring, whether it's with regard to climate change, whether it's with regard to women's reproductive rights, contraception, IVF, same-sex marriage, LGBT rights, fair maps, the Voting Rights Act, democracy itself, that all is going to have a major, major impact in this next election. Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, I've said it before, I'll say it again, they are 75 and 74 years old. If Donald Trump wins in November, he will have the opportunity, almost the guarantee, to replace both of those guys on the Supreme Court with 40-year-olds who will carry out their legacy for the rest of our lives. And so this is our opportunity. even if you're not, thrilled on the idea, sold on the idea of going out to bat for Joe Biden because of whatever reason you have, this is not about Joe Biden in this upcoming election. This is about the future of this country, the future of the court, and the extreme power that they have. So we have an opportunity right now to fix some wrongs that we've seen. So that's what's on the ballot as we head toward November.
Yeah, Brian, and let me add, it's such a great point when you say it's not about Joe Biden. That's no disrespect intended. He's been a very good president. He has accomplished so much. And you know what? He may not be an expert orator, and we all know what his age is. But getting to the polls and voting for Joe Biden, voting against Donald Trump, is not about Joe Biden. It's not even about Donald Trump. It's about us.
Yep.
We have a Supreme Court that has revoked women's constitutional privacy rights. Donald Trump and the Republicans think they get to make a woman's reproductive rights for her without her consent and over her objection. Are you flippin' kidding me? We've seen how they have all but taken away affirmative action forever, keeping minorities on unequal footing when it comes to educational opportunities in America. They have basically sanctioned business discrimination against our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters, as long as those business people cloak their discrimination in religious piety. And now they're grabbing more and more power for themselves, and they're marginalizing the very experts, the public servants who are working in government rather than making 2, 3, 4 times the salary they could make to help protect the American people. I mean, go to the polls, not because of Joe Biden or because of Donald Trump. Go to the polls for us.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Of course, we'll stay on top of any other legal issues as they continue to arise. For those watching right now, if you want to support the work that Glenn and I do and support our channels, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of those channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.